The power vacuum left after MJ's retirement was huge. All of a sudden, loads of NBA superpowers were thinking it was their time. However, there was a huge war brewing between two of the biggest and best competitors in the league, David Robinson and Shaquille O'Neal. And this war involved trash talk, a complete all-star game shutout, and the most pettiest 71-point game in NBA history. This story has 5 chapters. Let's begin. Our story starts with Shaq entering the league in the 1992 draft, going first to the Orlando Magic. Standing at 7'1" and weighing over 300 pounds, Shaq was immediately a force to be reckoned with. Shaq averaged 23 points, 14 rebounds, and 3.5 blocks per game in his rookie campaign. His size and strength made him almost impossible to stop, and this didn't go unnoticed as he was named Rookie of the Year and made the All-Star team too, as a starter no less, something only 45 other players have accomplished. Other players in the league, however, wasn't a fan of Shaq's big, loud, often brutish personality. They questioned why was a rookie garnering all this media attention. Was it solely because of his freakish speed, agility, and superhuman strength on the court? Or was it because of his larger-than-life attitude, bravado, and personality? Who knows really, but going into the 1994 season, some of the NBA players definitely put a bigger target on Shaq's back. One of those players was David Robinson. David Robinson wasn't new to Shaq. While Shaq was tearing up high school and college, David was already eclipsing him as the hero and the best player of the local NBA team, the Spurs. There was only room for one towering skilled big man in San Antonio, it seemed. Shaq and David were polar opposites as well with their stardom. Shaq was a loud rapper, featuring in movies and TV shows, while David was staying 2 years later in the Naval Academy to complete his service. He was also very religious, so 2 very different superstars, but both very, very good. The problem for Shaq though is that it wasn't just David whose skin Shaq crawled under. It was a lot of the league, and they plotted revenge, and it would take place on one of the biggest stages possible, the 1994 season All-Star Game. Orchestrated by Supersonics coach at the time George Karl, they devised a plan to double and often triple team Shaq to force him off the ball, throw him off his game and just flat out embarrass him. And it worked too, as he went 2 of 12 from the field. And even though it was fairly obvious that something was up, the rest of the Western team denied they were up to anything. But it was so obvious. Shaq vowed to get revenge, and it started with the Magic's next game against the George Karl-led Supersonics. This game, luckily for Shaq, wasn't really too far away, allowing for him to unleash his pent-up rage. In order for him to get his revenge, he needed to show the Supersonics up and prove that the All-Star Game was a fluke. He did have his work cut out for him though, since the roster did have Gary Payton, Shawn Kemp and Detlef Schrempf. This, however, meant nothing to Shaq, as he showed up, blowing the Supersonics out 124-93 and going off for 38 points and 20 rebounds. Shaq wasn't done though, as the stars would align for him on his 22nd birthday, as the Magic were penciled in to play the Spurs, and Shaq was ready to beat the brakes off David Robinson for his part in the All-Star Game shutout. It came out during an interview that Shaq had another reason to have a grudge with the Admiral, since according to Shaq, David refused to give him an interview all the way back when he was in school, and this only added fuel to Shaq's fire, and he was ready to cause carnage on his birthday, right in front of the San Antonio crowd too, no less. As Shaq set up, he was ready. He had already cut off the brains behind the All-Star Game shutout, George Karl, but now he had to tackle the person who was actually responsible for some of those double teams, David Robinson. And to be fair, Shaq played extremely well, scoring 32 points on 11 of 20 shooting. That's great, right? Well, considering the Admiral heard the noise from Shaq and brought his game too, going off for 36 points, 13 rebounds, 7 assists, 6 blocks and 3 steals. Looking like 2K numbers. So Shaq failed in front of his hometown crowd and with his family in attendance too, no less. So there was only one other way Shaq could get his revenge on the league and David Robinson. So if we fast forward until there's 1 game left of the season, Shaq was currently in the scoring title lead with 2,345 points, ahead of the next person by 33 points. But guess who it was there in second place? David Robinson. Shaq edged Robinson by only 0.6 points a game, Shaq averaging 29.3 points per game, while David Robinson was averaging 29.1. The Spurs and the Spurs coaching staff, and well, to be honest, most of the NBA wanted the Admiral to win that scoring title. But Shaq wasn't going to let that happen, because in his last game against the Nets, he went off for 32 points and 22 rebounds in a cruise drive by 120-91 victory. The Spurs' last game, however, was against the lowly Clippers, and the Spurs got to work to try and upset and embarrass Shaq even more. And straight from the tip, the Admiral was fed the ball and he went to work. The very first play of the game, he scored a silky smooth turnaround jumper. The Admiral went deep into his bag as he scored the Spurs' first 18 points. And to be honest, it was getting quite out of hand. But the Spurs just kept on feeding David the ball and he was just sinking everything. At this point in David Robinson's career, his highest scoring game was 52. And he was going to sail straight past it. The Spurs even started to foul the Clippers just so they would get the ball back faster. So what was the result of this madness? Well, the Spurs' next best scorer had 8 points, and that was Dennis Rodman of all people. David, however, went off, scoring 26 from 41 attempts, combined with 18 from 25 from the free throw line, totaling a colossal 71 points in a 112-97 victory. The crowd in San Antonio were on its feet, cheering for David Robinson as he walked off the court, now with the scoring title in his hand, since this gargantuan effort was enough to push David Robinson into the scoring champion slot, as he had 2,383 points to Shaq's 2,377, only 6 points in it. What a dramatic and unforgettable way to end this season. Magic coach Bryant said the game was an absolute mockery, and this could be seen as a petty and cheap way to win the scoring title. Shaq had this to say: "I heard they ran every play to David Robinson. If that would have happened down here, I would have had 70 points too. I didn't care." Shaq would then go on to add, "It would have been nice, but 50 wins were more important to me than the scoring title." Shaq just had to have the last laugh. It's also worth noting that Shaq did admit the story about David not giving him a signature was a complete lie, and it was something he needed to do to get himself worked up more. Something that MJ used to do as well. And that's the story of how Shaq got embarrassed. He tried to get revenge on his birthday, but then failed. Do you think it was fair or foul play by the Spurs? Let me know in the comments below. If you like that video, why don't you watch this one here where I asked an AI who the top 10 NBA players are of all time.